Aloha friends, this is Dr. Rick Bennett. I've been involved in water quality research in surface waters and in oceans for over 40 years. And for the last 10 plus years, I've been working hard with others, including the Kona Coast Waterkeeper, to develop reusable water because we don't have any water to waste. And what we have found here recently is solar disinfection of wastewater is a sustainable and cost-effective process. We have the solar resource. Let's use it. Don't pretend like it's not there any longer. Well, at the Kealakehe Wastewater Treatment Plant, which is the focus of our attention, there are 5 ponds, and the first pond receives raw sewage without the solids. And then it goes through a series of ponds over many weeks. It is extensively aerated and solarized. And I'm pleased to report that we found recently that fecal coliform counts in pond number 5 are as low as 100 to 200 colony forming units per 100 mils. This is quite low. I was quite surprised. We only have to drop it by a factor of 100 to get down to R1 levels, so we can use that water for all purposes. We don't need very expensive ultraviolet chambers to do that. We can add more solar ultraviolet treatment and do it in a way that is very effective so that we can disinfect between 1 and 5 million gallons of wastewater a day at final built out for the plant using the sun. So some solar raceways like these, it's not drawn to scale. At this point, I'm not sure how many square feet of raceways we're going to need, but we can do that calculation someday soon. And we can put that water, once it's been filtered to remove a lot of the algae and other fine sediments, in the raceway and produce R1 water. Here's what it kind of looks like. This is a contemporary picture of an algae growth raceway at Nelha. In our application, we'd just simply be putting in highly treated wastewater into these raceways to allow for the intense solarization that occurs at that location. The state and the feds require R1 water for the irrigation of all things, whether it be grass or food crops. If you're going to do food crops, you're going to have human contact. It has to be at the R1 level, which means that the fecal coliform counts on average are 2.2 per 100 mils. And to get there, we have to filter it first to get down to 2 turbidity units, or NTUs. And you can see the number 2 on that scale there is fairly clear, but it's not absolutely clear. It's clear enough to allow for solar penetration of the waters. The system that got everybody's attention, the overall system, was $160 million. The ultraviolet system alone was $76 million. And it has very high O&M costs, operations and maintenance. It uses a phenomenal amount of electricity. And in Hawaii, that electricity is very expensive. There is no electricity cogeneration at the site. There really ought to be. In contrast, according to the National Renewable Energy Lab, these raceways can be constructed for as little as $42,000 per acre for small acreages. And if you're going to go to larger acreages, perhaps 10 acres, the cost can be right around $25,000 per acre for 10 acres. So you do the math and you see that this kind of system to get R1 water is a fraction of the cost of the commercial industrial ultraviolet system that was proposed. Let there be no mistake. Solar treatment of water works. People are treating their water in the lesser developed countries with simple systems to a little more complicated systems, and it makes drinking water safe. Now, how much solar energy is at Kealakehe? Well, there are solar energy maps that you can download into your computer and you can take a look. So here's the location at Kealakehe, and it says that in a typical day, we're going to peak at solar energy around 600 watts per square meter. And you can see that between like 10 and 3, that's when we're getting most of our solar energy. That's what we call the solar day. What about the year? Well, if you look down at the lower right-hand corner, you see that during the year it's quite constant on average, with a little bit of lower production in the winter months, probably due to these occasional storms that come through Kona in the winter, which is typically our dry season. Now, at a specific site, it looks something like this. This is some actual solar radiation data from the resort at Kokio, where they have one of these tempest meters, and on a given day, you get a profile like this. So up around 1,000 or 1,100 watts per square meter is fairly typical for the afternoon or the noon hours there. But these humps and valleys are due to passing clouds. That is not a problem. It's the area under the curve that's of interest. And so this technology can be put at site at Kealakehe to monitor the day-by-day solar radiation to assure that each lot or each batch of water is getting an adequate amount of energy to do the disinfection. Well, the science behind this process is very, very sound. Here's a review article that was published a couple of years ago. It's a very long, comprehensive review of the science. And one of the lead authors is Dr. Alexandria Boehm. She's a distinguished professor at Stanford University. I have read much of her work. She's done a lot of work in Hawaii. She's an outstanding researcher that likes to do practical things. So here's an application where her name and her colleagues is saying the sun can do an effective job of disinfection. In fact, they go on to say it's a proven design, these raceway systems, that high levels of sunlight-mediated disinfection occur. And it's quite reliable, quite predictable. Why we don't see more of these in the United States, I can only imagine it's just a question of the traditions of engineers. So what influences the kill rate of the sun? Well, a couple things that probably make a lot of sense to you. One is the depth of the water. And as the water gets a foot or more deep, down there at 20 to 30 centimeters, the kill rate drops off fairly dramatically. So these raceways have got to be fairly shallow. The other thing that greatly influences the kill rate is the turbidity. In clear water, you can see that the kill rate here by the size of the circle is quite good. And you get down into wetland water that has a lot of suspended material in the wetlands, the kill rate drops. And as you go deep into wetlands, 20 centimeters deep, the kill rate drops way, way off. And so controlling turbidity and controlling depth is a way to assure the efficacy of solar disinfection. Now, we've always thought that there's just basically one way the sunlight kills germs, and that's by direct impacts on the DNA, scrambling the genetic code, erasing the directions for how the cell becomes and does the cell stuff. But there are two other mechanisms where solar energy is energizing other compounds, and those other compounds are lethal for the microbe. So there's three ways that sunlight helps kill microbes. Now, the lethality is determined by the extent of the irradiation and the time of irradiation. So here we have something called the area under the curve. And they simply make a rectangle out of it to make the calculations easy. But if you have a lower level of irradiation and you have longer periods, or you have higher levels of irradiation for short periods, the kill rate is the same. It's the area under the curve that determines the kill rate. This can be seen in an experiment that was done with sewage put into ocean water and then exposed to sunlight. You can see that for a number of organisms, the survival drops quite quickly. And by the end of 10 hours, most of these microbe classes have dropped 2 and 3 orders of magnitude. So down from 100,000 to 1,000 to as low as 100. Then nighttime comes and things tend to level off a bit. Then with the next few hours of intense sunlight, we can drop these bacteria counts to undetectable in many cases. And so that means when we've hit that level of energy absorbed in terms of megajoules, a unit of energy over time, that when we hit 20 megajoules, we can expect a very significant drop in the number of microbes, even to the level of indetectable after a day or two of intense sunlight. So economical UV disinfection of wastewater merits our attention, and in my opinion merits a pilot project at the Kealakehe Wastewater Treatment Plant to confirm that our wastewater under our conditions can be brought to R1 level. And by producing reclaimed water at the R1 level means people can have confidence that it's safe, acceptance for its use in public places like playgrounds, and greater acceptance for its reuse. And the reason that is important is water reused is fresh water saved, and we do not have an infinite supply of fresh water, very much driven by the rain. Thank you for listening. Please support this concept. It's a way of saving money, producing safe water very effectively and for the least cost.